basically, you know, a live pro who, you know, dabbled in some 100 and 200 Zoom and then only came around into the bigger stuff because of COVID. I mean, first of all, I didn't know that. I guess I knew nothing about Jeremiah other than that he played reasonably high stakes and his YouTube videos are excellent. But yeah, so that was cool. I pretty much just got back into poker because of COVID as well. I was doing some supply teaching and planning on becoming a teacher, maybe, although already at that point I was not loving my life as a teacher. But yeah, it was COVID that made me put a little money on ACR, and I played there for a bit, and then it was through there after that I applied to BrPC. These spots I find a little weird against the short stacks. I'm going to go ahead and still 3-bet this hand. I'm going to 3-bet fold, and I'm going to use a smaller size. I don't think you need to make it huge, 40 big blinds deep. And you probably do need to 3-bet call some, you know, non-nutted hands. Like King Queen suited probably just needs to 3-bet call here. And then, yeah, I like this board as a bet fold. Himi yeah, asks, how long should an applicant need to wait for a reply? The process is not short. I'll just say that. And then here with the gut shot, I'm just gonna go for it. I don't love it. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I mean, I think I've been on the team since November of the year before last, so I'm not sure. But it certainly was far from immediate. I don't know, hopefully there's someone you can reach out to. I don't really have a great answer to this. And Hockey HH says, do you always take max EV line in these pools? Since it's anonymous, there's no point to balance your ranges, and you should always just do what your hand wants to do. So yes, I agree. That said, you don't really know who you're playing against, so how are you supposed to know? Like in GTO, there's not some hand that's like doing this just for balance, right? Like all of the hands are playing in the max EV way against the opponent's strategy. There's no hand that can change what it's doing and make more money. So do I consciously deviate from what I think solver would do? Here we're just gonna jam. It's a very bizarre size. No, I basically just try to play like solver. Okay. Now there are spots where I think based on the MDA I've seen through BrPC that I can do better. And so we saw an example of that earlier where I took some random nothing hand and small bet turn over bet river against a recreational. So yeah, I would say my answer is yes. I do always try to take what I think is the max EV line in these pools. But I would also say that that's kind of what I do in general. This is a low frequency 3-bet for me, and we had rolled an 11. Easy 4-bet. This is the size I like. But like, for example, you know, I'm sure there are people in this pool who are never 3-betting Queen 7 suited, but it's not like I 3-bet Queen 7 suited thinking that, it's not that I 3-bet Queen 7 suited, you know, sorry, I lost my train of thought here playing this 4-bet. Let me come back to that. Yeah, just a crappy spot. What are we getting? 64, we're getting 2-1. I think we need to call here. We'll run into some occasional diamonds. But yeah, this spot is gross. And yeah, we're gonna run into this a lot and we'll run good. That's nice. But even if he shows us pocket 10s, it's very close with the backdoor flush draw. And so since he can have some worse hands, you know, those positions though, actually I think I don't know. We'll let's run that one. that might have been a spew, but we got there. So mark for review. Yeah, that one maybe could have used some more thought. Okay, what was I saying? Right, do I always take the highest EV line? Yes, but I do also try to play balanced ranges because again, I don't know what button is doing. But I have a range from GTA Wizard that I know doesn't matter what button's doing. It's a good solid range. So I just try to play that. I don't try to do things like I think pool under calls or under folds to 3-bets. Whoops, what did I just do there? So some mix. Okay, I've broken the chat. This hand can do either one. We rolled a 29, so we'll bet. How do I how do I get out of this? Here versus a min raise from a probable weaker player, I'm gonna call. And then river is an interesting spot. I think jam is the only size we want to use. Here, I'll check. Oh shit. That's unfortunate. Yeah, I don't know. That's a close one. The queen is unfortunate because I don't think recreational players are ever folding a queen. Obviously the ace of diamonds is a decent blocker. I've lost my chat. Okay, there we go. Too many things happening at once. It's funny how that goes, where it felt like I had all the time in the world and a whole bunch of hands, and then you get a couple random little problems, and yeah. Release an ebook. Okay. King, queen, I think I am mostly checking. Sorry, I just got a text. I want to make sure it's not anything about the stream. No, okay. Turn that off. And I don't think our hand wants to bluff here without a club. Maybe I can bet somewhere there. Give me a chip says, interesting, I thought BrPC taught a more expo approach. So I would say yes, in general they do. And especially for lower stakes players, absolutely. I think, you know, as you move up though, you have to move a little more towards, okay, a little more towards solver. And yikes, that's a bad flop. Here I just think check raise is going to be the main play by far. And I would also say that I probably take the exploits less far than some other people do. And yeah, here we just want to keep barreling. Something that's going to set up, you know, roughly geometrically. It looks like I could have gone a touch bigger. Villain's play, certainly, I mean, you get stacked with aces, it's never going to be too terrible. I'm wondering about the turn jam, though. Feels to me like aces in particular don't have a whole lot of incentive to jam. Yeah, okay, that's a good example, so I'll talk about this one in a second. Here, ace-queen just has no showdown. That hand should definitely value by river. Okay, yeah, so Hockey HH says, for example, I usually just overbet way more often with my bluffs than value because in my hands, pool overfolds to overbets. So, first of all, I agree. I think, and you know, we saw one example where I was certainly vastly, I may be that I was bluffing 100% of the time in that line because I would have taken a different line on the turn with a better hand. Certainly, I think there are some spots where that is definitely true, and you should do that. And I do take some of those. That said, you can have a spot where pool overfolds to overbets, and yet you're still better off overbetting with your value hands, because the overbet just needs to get called significantly less often than the 75. I'm not going to try too hard to explain it at the moment because, as we've already seen, I'm struggling a little to talk and play. This hand's going to pure continue, and on 83 we'll call. But yeah, you can play around. That's a weird flop. You can play around a bit with an Excel spreadsheet or a calculator, and you can see plenty of spots where if villain plays GTO against a 75 size and slightly undercalls versus a 150, you're still better off 150ing with value, just because they have to put in more money on average. I gotta tell you, I have absolutely no idea here, but I'm gonna guess we don't want to jam. I'm going to call. And now just a very easy check fold with our hand. If he checks back, so on the one hand, I mean, it's very, very hard to get to the river with a bluff, and so I probably will bluff this one, but I am very not excited by it. That's an interesting size. I feel like we still need to call. I don't know if our hand will do some like small raising or something. And I don't think we get to do any donks. And so we just lose. We will run this one for sure because I have absolutely no idea. I would say 4-bet pots in general, I am quite lost in. And then this one especially so. A nice hand to our opponent. And we will mark that one. One thing I have seen in some spots is some oddly small raises. Like I wonder if maybe, especially versus the tiny bets, like you need to small raise with some very bizarre hands. And so I wouldn't be shocked if our hand even gets in there a little bit. I don't think we can ever fold. There are so few flushes villain can have, and we're getting a ridiculous price. And on the flop, mark that one. On the flop as well, I don't think we can fold. Or sorry, of course we can't fold. But I don't think we want to jam on that board. Like we're not actually in that great of shape against the hands that want to call off. And villain, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It's funny, I find with 4-bet pots especially, like it's very hard to reason them out. Often, you'll have these reasons that seem like they make sense, and then you check solver, and I don't know. Sometimes playing 4-bet pots just doesn't seem to hold up to reason very well. I like big on this board. 300 big blinds deep. Honestly, I don't approach too much differently. In part, that's from a lack of study, and in part, it's because I don't think anyone really knows what they're doing. And so if I just play a solid 100 big blind strategy, I don't think I'm gonna get super exploited. Turn, I think our hand is a decent barrel. I don't think it has to barrel, but I will on a 37. Neither of us should have a ton of threes. Certainly big blind will have a 3x advantage, but we have a very big advantage in the overpairs. And then this hand is just going to be a definite bluff. And I like the overbet here. We're basically repping flushes. And better, right? We'll have pocket fours, pocket threes, pocket tens. But that's a spot where, again, I'm probably quite significantly over bluffing. And so I do agree with your general idea, Hockey HH, that people do overfold overbets. And so you want to push those a little bit. But I don't go all the way. Like if I had king, queen, no spade, I probably would not go for that. Even though maybe I should. So you don't see much of the bigger sizings on mono boards. My hand's just going to be super easy call. Obviously not the turn we're hoping for, but we're still going to have to call a bet with outs to improve. And if it goes check, we'll have a weird river spot. Yeah, I think just no raises with my hand and all calls. And that's not a good run out. Yeah, just an easy fold, obviously. I would say, I would suspect the pool somewhat underbluffs there, but I don't have any hard data. But from what I have seen, the triple barrels on the 4 flush boards tend to be slightly underbluffed. And I think in general that makes sense. Like in spots where, I think the spots where you see the biggest overbluffs are the ones where there's a ton of natural bluffs. So like where there are a lot of flopped gut shots or a lot of turned gut shots in a high c-bet frequency flop. Whereas there, it's easy to do a lot of giving up on the flop, and it's easy to do a lot of giving up on the turn. And then it's, you don't necessarily want to try to bluff people off flushes super often. So I think it's just the kind of spots where you have to work a little harder to find the bluffs, are the ones where it's a little more likely the pool will underbluff. I'll mark that one too, though. Both are fine. 87, check. And here, both are fine. 12, we will bet. I'm curious, Hockey H, I think you said you play in this pool, right? Because one thing I will say is, I think the overbets used to work better. I don't know if it's because more people are overbetting. No reason to do anything but check here. And you know, some people are starting to catch on, but I have had some people call some overbets in very light in several spots recently. Basically pure call at this stack depth. getting the mono boards. I think this hand is, honestly, I don't think it's a pure fold, but I have no idea what I'm doing with it, and yeah, I'm gonna lean slightly towards fold with a hand that has no playability. NJSTK says, I remember Saulo saying something about how if you don't exploit but make one big mistake every so often, it can be hard to win and more higher than 2 big blinds per 100. Do you have any opinions on that? So, ooh, sorry, let me just play this hand. Something like that. So big mistakes in general can crush your win rate very quickly. There's a spreadsheet that went around BrPC at one point, kind of showing that you know, if you're making a 40 big blind mistake, and you know, this is just math, right? If you're making a 40 big blind mistake every 2K hands, then you know, that's 2 big blinds per 100 off your win rate. It's very easy to do that. I'm gonna go with the block here. I think we'll get some calls for more say size. Yeah, it's very easy to blow up a decent win rate with a couple mistakes. I think that's true whether you exploit or not. And you know, I will also say that if you are trying really hard to exploit, it's easy to mess up. So there are some good hard exploits, and those hammer away. But there are others where it's a little less clear, and if you're misapplying, or you know, you can make mistakes whether you're exploiting or trying to play GTO. So I do agree with them that absolutely the big mistakes can destroy your win rate in a hurry. But I think that's kind of true both ways. Maybe what he's saying is that with exploits, you can have a much higher win rate. That makes sense to me. This is not a spot I'm super thrilled with. I think the short stacks tend to 3-bet a little too tight from the big blind. God, and we face pot. How big of a nit do I feel like being today? Okay, we're gonna mark this under the check later, but that's definitely not not a solver approved fold. But I think it's a spot where you see a significant under 3-bet from weaker players in the big blind, especially versus under the gun, and that pot size c-bet. I'll be very sad if I look later in c10s, but I think that's going to be an overpair the vast majority of the time. But I think that's the problem I've had at various points in my career is yeah, just you know, playing decently, but then just kind of making a terrible river call a little more often than you'd like to, and you know, that can turn a 3 big blind win rate into a 0 big blind win rate very quickly. I'll start with small. I think you can do some sizing up. I haven't studied enough early position. I know that really big sizes get used a lot less, although someone pointed out to me, I think in a run at once, thread once, that's mostly true when you 2.5x. If you start min raising under the gun, you do start to see more overbets. But so I know we don't use very large bets. I know there are boards where we use a lot more 3/4, and so there are some boards that I implement that on, but I haven't gone far enough with it to use it a lot. Mostly I still just use small for early position versus big blind. Just gonna make sure everything is working, yeah. Oh, just as a reminder, we will be doing the GTO Wizard giveaway at the end of the stream. So something like 45 minutes, I'll stop the tables and start looking through some hands in GTO Wizard. And when I tell you to, let's go with the small 3-bet. Could also just fold or flat. Versus this stack size, though, you don't want to go big. But yeah, when I tell you to, you can write GTO Wizard in all small letters, and Paulo will pick 3 winners. But that'll come in about 45 minutes. Jack 10 suited, actually, looking back, don't like that 3-bet. But it's not a disaster. I think your 3-bet folds, again, I'm not an expert at these shorter stacks, but I think your 3-bet folds probably want to be more focused on blockers to the 4-betting range than they do on playability when you get called. So this one will mix, and we rolled a 28, so we'll call. And continue versus most sizes here. That size is already somewhat close, but I think we will still call. And now our hand is basically worthless. Super high frequency barrel card, and just not much we can do with our hand. So that makes sense. Where do you often see mistakes that big? So the only place to make that big a mistake is on the river, and that's where I would define mistake slightly differently, because there are some mistakes that when you go look in the solver, it will tell you. I mean, you need to try to make a mistake that solver says is minus 40 big blinds. But I do think there are plenty of spots in practice where you can make 40 big blind mistakes, and they specifically come in river spots where you're calling a bet with a bluff catcher in an underbluffed line. I mean, there are situations, and I have seen calls that I have made in coaching, where it's like, I mean, that guy is never bluffing, and I am calling a pure bluff catcher, and yeah, that's a minus 50 big blind stop or mistake. And so yeah, that's where it happens. Again, you're not going to find these in solver, but that's how it goes. And then hockey HH10. Yeah, and sorry, just to finish my answer, like you need to do something extra special to make a 40 big blind mistake on the flop, and you need to do something pretty special on the turn as well. So it's basically river play, and that's something I've been working more on the river spots. And I mean, I just make mistakes constantly against solver and river, whereas I'm very good at a lot of the flop spots. So definitely something I need to work on. And yeah, that's where the big EVU gains and losses come from. Very connected board. I'm just going to give up. Okay, Hockey H says, try to hard to exploit player short stacked or using improper raise sizing, always assuming fish, which isn't always the case, and sometimes get too far of a line doing it. I can very much identify. With that. It's tough in these pools because yeah, you just don't know. Even when it's probably a recreational, you don't know what kind, and you have no HUD, you have no stats, obviously. So yeah, it's tough, and you're gonna. That's part of it, is when you're trying hard to exploit, every once in a while you're going to get owned. And that's fine. Most of the time you are getting a little extra by making those exploits. So I try not to worry about it too much, but I have had some true disasters where I'm trying a little extra hard to exploit.